Hello, everyone. Welcome to another game competition. Today we have amazing sessions focused on optimal ad monetization. So a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience shared with you. So let's invite our amazing speakers. So let's invite to the stage Christian Calderon, who is co-founder and CEO of Gamejam, with very extensive experience on ad monetization. So hello, Chris.
Hey, Marius, thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. Let's invite Jakub, Remiar, who is head of monetization at Traplight Games. And he will share his amazing experience with us as well.
Hello, hi, Marius. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And then let's invite Eren Gokur, who is mobile apps consultant working with ad monetization at Google.
Hello, everyone. Very excited to be here.
So I'm pretty sure it will be a really amazing session. So let's go further. So of course, everyone, please remember that if you would like to get freshest information about upcoming webinars, you can just sign up at our newsletter, and then every few weeks we'll just send you info about the next sessions coming in the next weeks. And then I really encourage you actually to join our session. It's really unique opportunity to ask questions, ask like even more details around the topics that are shared by Christian, Jakub, and Eren. So with that, just go to the slide and enter GameCamp as the name of the event, and then you can ask questions. So not waiting longer, let's invite our first speaker, Christian, who will talk about optimization of ad monetization based on the tests, including a lot of recent tests actually that he was doing for that ad monetization. So Christian, the stage is yours. Christian, you are mute.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Marius. Thank you so much for having me. Hey, everyone. My name is Christian Calderon. I'm the CEO at Gamejam. Previously, I've been an executive at a few other gaming startups like Kixeye, Ketchup, and Dots. And here at Gamejam, we've been growing pretty fast. Over the last 12 months, we've achieved a little bit over 200 million downloads and this year. And we're happy to be growing, and really happy today to be talking to you about monetization. And I have a lot of recent and fresh test data to talk about iOS 14.5 and some of the differences we've been seeing amongst our games with iOS 14.5. I think to start off, I just wanted to, with pretty much every mobile gaming monetization talk I've ever given, I always start with like an update of this slide. And we just updated it for this year. I think this slide is extremely important because it talks about, four main things that are always on top of mind, year over year, how things are trending. But you can see in this slide in the first quadrant in the top left, you can see smartphone penetration, and you can see it's been growing, single digits in the billions of users every year. And you can see mobile ad spend is still growing double digits year over year. And at the bottom right, you can see mobile ad spend per user keeps going up every year. And so I think this is really important to think about, especially with all the changes that are happening in the store. These are kind of like the macroeconomics, driving change into the ecosystem. And so it's always important to think about these things. That being said, let's go over some recent data with iOS 14.5 and look at some examples. And so basically, we looked at 25 different games across our portfolio. And we're looking at fresh data. So this is plus and minus 2 weeks before and after April 26, which was the day Apple released iOS 14.5. And we're looking mainly at two groups of users. Anybody on iOS 14.5 and up, and then also anyone below iOS 14, anyone for iOS 14 4.2 and below. And we're looking at USA data only, just to keep things easy to understand. One thing to note, and this is just as of yesterday, it's still pretty low rollout. So like iOS 14.5 as a percentage of our total DAU is just around 6%, and it's been 2 weeks now. So it's surprisingly still pretty low. So if you're looking at similar data as us, in these examples, it's, I guess, really important to isolate the OS version and use segmentation in your analysis, because on the grand scheme of things, it's not a huge impact so far as of total DAU. In terms of iOS 14.5. So some questions I wanted to ask and answer for you guys today, because you guys are probably asking the same questions, is how iOS 14.5 impact CPMs on my games. We got a lot of games, they all monetize with ads, and so this is a really big change, and so we want to kind of know what's happening. Are there any other KPIs that I should monitor, which will be impacted by iOS 14.5? Obviously, what is the best ATT opt-in rate I can get? And we'll share some of that information. And how will ATT opt-in rate affect my CPMs? And we'll share some of that information for you today. So first things first, this colorful chart here. Each bar represents a game, and you can kind of see that on average, we're getting between 69 and 77% opt-in. We'll dive a little bit deeper into this. But between 69 and 77% opt-in across all of our games on average. You can see there's some that are lower, some a little bit higher, but that's the range between the medium and the mean. And also it's fairly flat. So over time, you can, in this chart, you can see each game represented as a line over day by day, and it's pretty flat. The opt-in rate, one of the things I was wondering is opt-in rate very high for these early adopters in the first 2 weeks. The data is still pretty early, right? It's only 6% adoption, and is this could this trend be trending low? Are we just seeing early data? So but right now it looks like it's the opt-in rates that we're getting look pretty consistent over the first 2 weeks, and on average for all of our games we're seeing an opt-in rate of 71% on average. Before, for the first 6 days after the ATT launch, and even within the last 6 days, it's still been 71% average across all of our games. Let's look a little bit into the logic really quick about how we're using ATT, so the flow. So basically, you open the game. We have some logic that's defined remotely so that we can test the logic. And this is we'll go over some of the tests too as well for you. But But this is things like, should I show the ATT prompt right at app open? Should I show it after the first level, after the tutorial? When should I do it? And then this is kind of like the flow for the prompt itself to get into the prompt. One thing also that is not noted on here, but it's important to note, is that we don't initialize monetization at all until the ATT prompt has been either confirmed or denied. This way, when we initialize, and if the user has confirmed, we are in fact passing back IDFA to the network, which is important. We'll go over in a second why it's important. But that's something important to note. If you're with your ATT prompt, highly recommend, at the start of a session, consider whether or not you have this permission, or if you've asked this, and you have IDFA before you initialize, because you want to pass back IDFA if you can, instead of a bunch of zeros to the network. And then here's some also different examples of artwork and templates that we use. We use different style buttons, different colors, different game art, and we've tested different creative as well. And if you guys have any questions on any of this stuff, you can hit me up later and we can go into this a little deeper for you. So here's some logic that we tested. So we looked at sending, if you look back at the flow here, with the different logic that's defined in our remote config, we looked at app open, showing the pop-up at app open, after a tutorial, after the first 2 levels, after 3 levels, and after 5 levels. And obviously these are all different stages of the funnel. And what we found is, later, as you go later into the funnel, and you ask, from what we're seeing, we're getting higher opt-in rates. And so this may not be a surprise for some, maybe it is for others, but we're seeing higher opt-in rates as we ask later down the funnel. Now it's also important to consider that how many users are getting to this stage, right? And how these opt-in rates affect your long-term CPM. So out of the 25 games that we looked at, in this chart, you can see the iOS 14.5 only CPM for interstitial ads, and then the opt-in rate for iOS 14.5 for that particular game. And you can see that there is a relationship here between, as the opt-in rate increases, you're seeing we're entering into higher CPM territory for some of these games, especially in the top right. Now it's not a super strong correlation, but there is you can see a little bit of a relationship here between higher opt-in rates and higher CPM. So I think that's important to note. One question that I was asking myself, is there going to be a big difference, if I have a really strong opt-in or not, and how will that impact my CPMs? So it does look like, from my takeaway from this and this slide in particular, we'll continue to monitor this data, is that ATT opt-in does have a substantial impact on CPM. Now, that being said, time for a little bit of bad news. So if we compare iOS, 14.5 CPM, for iOS 14.5 plus to users, iOS 14.42 and below, the same cohort, the same group of users, just different iOS versions over the same time period, we can see actually there's a negative change and negative impact in CPM overall. So like over on average across all of our games, we're seeing we're seeing a decrease in about 10% CPM for users iOS 14.5 and above, which actually not too bad. I mean, I heard some people saying there was going to be a 50% drop, so this is not 50%. So I'll take 10% over 50%. So obviously this is still early, but it's important. If you look at this on an overall basis, you probably won't see an impact right now. But I recommend, if you're trying to understand the change here, to definitely segment out users, on iOS 14.5 and above, or that have engaged with this prompt, yes or no, to draw some conclusions on how it's affecting CPM in your games. For us, it's been a drop of about 10%, so not too bad. So bad news, but maybe not that bad. One thing I've been asking myself about this is, what's going to happen with CTRs? So as you know, with iOS 14.5, it limits our ability to target, right? And my theory was like, okay, like we're just going to see CTRs go crazy through the roof. Everyone's going to advertise, these HTML5 ads, and boom, after one click, you're going to go to the store. And it's actually not as bad as I thought. But we are seeing a small increase in CTR, so it is happening, but not as bad as I thought. I think this is important to consider. I think this is maybe it's not as bad because this is kind of a general trend we've been seeing. For those of you that have been around, the industry for a few years, you could definitely tell, like over the last 12 months, that these CTR ads have been getting crazy, right? And so maybe we've kind of already hit massive adoption on this, and any other change with iOS 14.5 is just incremental. But I do think that without targeting, we could potentially see higher CTR ads from users on iOS 14.5. So something to take into consideration. And at the end of the presentation, we have a little solution to this that we can share with you as well. But definitely something to note. Okay, and the other thing I thought that this was interesting, and hopefully this can help you, and I think you should test it, is we've seen actually a decrease overall in latency for iOS 14.5 users. And so what this says to me, and about 10% less latency, which is good. And so what this tells me is that potentially you can test slightly deeper waterfalls. So for the decrease you're seeing in CPM, maybe you can improve it a little bit by stacking up your waterfall a little bit more for iOS 14.5 users, and to try to counterbalance the CPM drop, because it looks like we'll have to dig into this more. But from our tests, we are seeing a decrease in latency on iOS 14.5. So maybe a small opportunity there to increase CPMs a little bit. So some takeaways. So yes, you can expect a drop in CPMs for iOS 14.5 users in the short term. I do believe, though, in the long term, and based on the first slide I showed you guys, and I've been showing this slide for like 5 years. Every year I update it. Ad spend per user just keeps going up every single year, and ad spend on mobile is just growing way faster than smartphone penetration. So I think in the long term, CPMs will continue to increase for everyone. So that's just a bet I've been making over the last 5 years. I'm going to continue to make that bet. I think that you want to find the right balance between high opt-in and high overall adoption. So even though you might get higher opt-in rates later on. Consider adoption. Find the right sweet spot. I've heard of people getting 60% opt-in rate on app open. So it is possible to get into the 60 to 80 range opt-in, and this does have a positive impact on CPMs. So do try to get strong opt-in. Also, explore adding more line. If you have a waterfall system, explore adding more line items for iOS 14.5 users. See if your for whatever, if your mediation has this feature or capability to stack more line items on iOS 14.5 users. And measure, before you do that, measure your latency. Maybe I should have said that. So measure your latency to see if there's an opportunity here, because this could potentially help increase CPMs. And the last thing I want to talk about is just you should prepare for higher CTR ads. This is a trend we've been seeing even before iOS 14.5. At Gamejam, one of the things that we've done is we've actually built our own ad quality dashboard, and it goes through and it looks at all the ads in across all of our games, and it gives us we built this in-house, and it tells us ads that have very high CTR, and we can preview the ads on Gamejam.com, and we can see if these ads have high CTR, then capture them and flag them and send them to the appropriate network for removal. So I think it's important to consider building something like this, or investing in a tool that does something similar, because this will probably be a problem, continue to be a problem over the next few in the future. Also, from the tests that we found, ad quality has a much higher impact to retention than frequency of ads. So like we've seen cohorts that you can show like 5, 6, 7, 8 ads per DAU in a day, and it not having a huge impact on retention. But the moment you start showing 100% CTR ads, you can expect some churn. So this, in my opinion, has a much higher impact to retention than ad frequency. So definitely check that out. And that's all for my presentation. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Mariusz, for having me, and hope you guys all enjoyed it.
Thanks, Chris. It was very insightful, and it's very precious for us to hear from an industry expert that is in the gaming space for a very long time, rather than research companies and so on. So thanks for sharing all the information from the heart of the field. So I can see that we have lots of questions, some questions in the section, but I would like to first add my first question, ask my first question to you. So in Google, we are also trying to monitor the ATT opt-in rates, its effect when there is no IDFA to the eCPM in terms of eCPM and so on. So those metrics you shared were very insightful. And my question is, so your data shows us that the later stage in the game you introduce ATT prompt, the higher opt-in rates you get, right? So that's your finding. Yeah, it's like more or less what we see in the industry as well. However, I would like to ask for your approach when it comes to striking the balance between how far should you consider showing the ATT prompt versus showing the ATT prompt earlier, because the far you show the ATT prompt, you would get maybe no impression according to your setup. You may not want to initialize the monetization SDKs and so on, or you may get with lower eCPMs in the beginning. So how do you approach on that? That's the question I had.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And for this, we're running some tests now. This is fresh data for you, just for Mariusz. I wanted to bring you the latest and greatest. But what we're doing now is we're looking at cumulative ARPU and how cumulative ARPU changes with the time to response on the prompt. And so we're going to measure this over all of the games. Maybe you guys will have me back and I can present some data on my findings at that point. But that's basically, what we're going to do, kind of similar to how you would test the optimal frequency of an ad in your ad placement in your game. How frequent are you going to use it, and how does that affect cumulative ARPU? So we're going to do the same thing with the prompt, the ATT prompt.
All right, makes sense. Thanks for sharing.
And maybe actually, to build on that question, do you believe that, how do you see that market going farther? And actually, that's one even the questions. Do you think that those ATT opt-in rates will go down, and or they will just stay stable? And do you think it's kind of some additional opportunity for the developers to build even some competitive advantage in the way that, okay, if I'm better at increasing those opt-in rates, then actually I can have even better eCPM than an industry. How do you see it actually in this case?
Yeah, so definitely. I was surprised that they were pretty stable. Obviously, it's still kind of early. My expectation was that they would go down, and maybe they will over time, as there are more features on the phone, for making it easier to do that. But my expectation is maybe go down. So far, we've seen it stay relatively stable. It's mostly dependent on the logic that we're using. Your second question, I definitely think there's a huge opportunity here. And so it's good now to test as much as you can, get in there early, start getting data, start testing, start trying to find that edge. Because 100%, I mean, we're seeing, stronger CPMs with better ATT opt-in rates. And if you can get that opt-in sooner, you can initialize quicker, and you can have a stronger LTV. You definitely have an edge. And so I definitely think there's a opportunity there. And also there's a huge data science opportunity here too as well, right? Because things are getting slowed down on the user acquisition side, and so definitely a lot of opportunities with this for new studios.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you, Chris, for that very interesting presso and those great insights. And please stay with us. And then let's go to our next presentation, our next speaker. Let's invite Jakub, who will be actually talking about how actually to optimize the game economy and optimize the mechanics inside the game event to actually to have optimal ad monetization.
Yeah, Jakub, thanks, Mariusz. Yeah, thank you. So maybe a short intro about me. Name's Jakub Remiar. Been in the industry for about 6 years now. Started even on a VR game during the Oculus years, but currently doing mostly mobile stuff, mobile free-to-play games, mainly mid-core genre, and working currently in the studio called Traplight, a Finnish studio doing the auto battler game Battle Legion. So what I want to talk today about is pretty much the ad monetization from game design side. So mostly, maybe let's do a simple categorization. If we look at ad monetization overall, let's maybe divide it into two parts: the external and internal part. The external part mostly is the part what Chris was talking about. So that's your typical eCPM, meaning how valuable are the impressions you sell, what's your mediation management, what's your country groups, biddings, waterfall, direct deals, stuff that's not directly connected to the gameplay. So it's the technical side. This is usually done by the ad monetization manager. let's assume for the rest of the presentation, this is working great and everything's efficient as possible and we're just making money. Because the important thing to note here is that these two parts work in Unity, and if one is too good and the other is not, it doesn't work at all. So let's move to the internal part, which is the in-game stuff. And we are looking mainly at KPIs such as ads per daily active users and ads engagement, meaning what's the percentage of your players that are actually watching ads and how many ads they are watching per player. Which brings us to the ad placements, which is the actual part where the game design happens. As we go further, I want to also note that most of the stuff I will be covering and the industry examples that I will be having here are from mid-core games and casual games. So not really going to cover any interstitials or rewarded interstitials or banner videos. So we'll be focusing mostly on mid-core stuff and the stuff that also being connected to the hybrid casual genre, which is kind of the hot topic currently. So later down the line as we go, let's also divide this another categorization, which is the difference between a static and dynamic placement. I think this is like really important to note, and later will come handy as I go further and further. So static is the one that's visible in the game UI. It usually never changes place and it needs to be kept. So let's say, for instance, the ad tower in Empires and Puzzles, which is the part of your main castle pretty much. And you just go there, you watch the ads, and you know it will always be there, and you need to then therefore cap it because users will just watch the videos over and over, and yeah, eCPM degradation turns in, so you don't really want to have multiple ads watching on at infinitum. In comparison, the dynamic placement is not immediately visible in the UI, and the important notion that it shows context value, which can be greatly different to the economic value. I will get into more detail about that, but let's leave it like that for now. And the other important fact is that this can be kept behind the scenes. For instance, let's say an doubling or tripling of your rewards after a victory battle. This is from Art of War Legions. Again, this can be kept behind the scenes because, again, you are looking to hit some kind of optimal ads per daily active user. And on the left side of the screen, you would see a cooldown or some kind of a mechanism that prevents you to watch the ads on and on and on and on. On the right side, this can work on the server side of, let's say, this can be behind the scenes, so the player doesn't even see it and he's not bothered by it. So that's always like a good thing. Not saying that static is bad or dynamic is good and just like you need to go one way or the other. Just for the sake of categorization, let's leave it like this. So if we go into more detail about the static placement, let's look at it more closely. So this is Puzzle Combat, the other game from Small Giant, which is similar to Empires and Puzzles, where there's even this thematic fit of a cinema that you have there. If you click it, it has random rewards. The user doesn't know what he will get, which is always great. So you get better chances of something, worse chances of something worse. And then it's seen doing core gameplay, the core loop. Because as the user goes throughout his castle, he upgrades stuff, he collects resources, and he always sees the ads icon, which is really important because you don't want to have your icon hidden between some other menus or somewhere there. This is pretty much your prime advertising space. The other important factor, it has economy impact because you are pretty much giving resources to the user. So these needs to be budgeted into game economy simulation. And again, this is the part where people start asking, like, can I do ads in my ad game and also turn in apps? Because one of the first primary, let's say, things to have in order to turn your game into IAP based game is to have some kind of economy going, because then pretty much what we will sell. So ads function as same in a way that you need to budget them in your economy. Let's say a good thing would be something in vicinity of like 15 to 20% of your economy gains to be going through ads. And then you see it based on the actual users and the resources in your data charts, how these are going. So let's say this is a simple static placement. Let's look at our game, Battle Legion, which we have a similar placement there. And this is the, let's say, ad theater, like we call it. Again, it thematically fits the game. It's in the main menu where you see it near the usual charge wagons and other resources that you have in the game. It has random rewards as the previous placement. It's seen during core loop as you collect the resources, but the distinction here is that it has consecutive rewards. And this means that if you watch one ad, then you are given the chance to watch an ad for better resources, as seen here. And then, of course, the latest one, which has the chance for the best resources. We put a cooldown between the ads, I think it's 25 or 30 seconds, so it's not really going forward and forward so fast because, again, eCPM degradation kicks in. But then as you finish it, it pretty much goes on to cooldown, and the user is not bothered by the placement anymore in a way that it's not even kind of showing him to click there. This helps really well in a way that you have pretty much set up the thing in a way that you have 3 ads now rather than just 1 ad, which is really good, especially if the user already goes to 1 ad. He already goes into this kind of a sunken fallacy thing that I already invested 1 ad, so why not watch the other one where there are even better rewards? So it really works well in a way that it keeps the baseline of our impressions. If we go later down the line, let's look at some dynamic placements. So let's say Archero. This presentation wouldn't be complete if I didn't mention Archero. Really encourage anyone that is thinking about implementing ads into their IAP game or the other way around to look into this, because Archero is pretty much a masterclass of ads integration into the core economy. And let's look at their ad wheel. This is pretty much the same placement as we look at Empires and Puzzles in our game. Again, it's a random rewards gacha that you can watch once for an ad. It's capped during the day for 5 ads. But the critical difference here is that this placement is shown to the user during core gameplay. The previous ones has to be clicked by the user voluntarily in the main screen. This one is shown directly when you're going from one room to the other between the dungeons. So again, the conversion on this one, I would guess, is much better because, yeah, you're pretty much giving that prime advertising space to your ads. Again, this has an economy impact because you again giving away resources. So if we go again further, you have this master placement where you pretty much meet a master that gives you some stats. The difference here is that this has no economy impact on the game. Archero works in a way that you start the run, you progress through the dungeons, you level up your character, and you either pass the dungeon and you die, collect the rewards, and start over. So what happens here is that the game gives you pretty much just a temporary boost that you get pretty much better chances. Here you have like 100 more HP when my character had like 2,500 already, so it's not that significant, but it didn't cut into the game economy, which is really important because in this context, the ads have really big value because I want to increase my character. I want to have better chance of fighting that boss or something like that. But in the end, the game is not giving away its economic value, which is really good. And the other thing is that it fits really well within the core gameplay. And this is, I guess, one of the most important rules. You don't really want to copy ad placements from other games. You want to create your own placement that fits your core gameplay because that gives the most value to the user. The other thing here that's worth noting is that the little letters on the bottom, it supports Battle Pass conversion because if you purchase the Battle Pass in Archero, you get this one for free without watching the ad, so you get it immediately, which is the latest trend recently where games that are, I would put into category of 50-50, meaning 50% of revenue is coming from ads and 50% from IAPs, they are pretty much giving away some of the ads impressions in favor of increasing Battle Pass conversion, which I will also get to back later. But just keep this in mind, and we'll get back to it later. Of course, Archero have multiple static placements. These ones are not even seen during core loop, the ones in the shop or like the one in their other passes. But again, this one is, I think, one of the best examples. Also, the other thing to note here, that the context value of this ad placement increases the further you put it. So let's say you're in the first or second or third room of the level. Yeah, it's great, but you die, and that was it pretty much. But if you put it later down the line, especially when the user has lost some of his health, or the context of the situation multiplies the value of that ad, which again increases the conversion, which is really good. Looking further, one of my other favorite placements is in Adventure Communist. Again, really good game, integrating IAPs into IAPs into pretty heavy ad game. Is the one where there's this airdrop ship. Again, it thematically fits the game. You're just playing the game here normally, and then what happens, there's this like plane going over on the top banner that has random rewards. It's seen between the core loop, because what you're doing is pretty much you're managing your economy here, and it's giving you, of course, economy impact because you're giving resources to it. What's happening here, on the other hand, is this dynamic conversion, because the ad is kind of tricky in a way that it can pretty much suits your needs and find the right sweet spot for the conversion. So what happens if I click the plane is that sometimes it just gives me the comrades currency, which is pretty expensive anyway, but it doesn't even open the pop-up. So it programs the user to click on it because there's like immediate reward on top of it. Some other times, the placements goes into the usual pop-up, and you have the watch ad placement. That's the usual one. The important factor here is you see there are different currencies within the ads. Sometimes there's a hard currency, sometimes there's a soft currency. There are multitudes of those soft currency. And what happens if you start closing the ad increases its kind of price, basically, the value that gives you in order to try to convert you. So by this dynamic system, you can pretty much find the sweet spot for the user to give him an optimal amount of resources for him to convert through the ad placement, but not go over it. And yeah, you can try it out yourself, and you will see pretty much immediately that if you start closing it and closing it, it will give you more and more and more valuable rewards. And this is really great when you're trying to moderate the ads per DAO ratio, pretty much, because you don't want to have the user just watching ads on and on and on, again, because of the ECPN degradation. You want to plan the ads throughout the whole session of the day. So this helps you to pretty much give a dynamic placement throughout the gameplay to increase the number to the point where you want it for each individual user. That's, I think, really handy. The other thing is the static placement. This is the typical one ×2 that pretty much every idle simulation is built upon. Important note, this needs to build into economy design from the start. Don't try this if you don't have it now. It thematically fits the game again. It has direct rewards. It's seen between the core loop. It has definitely economy impact because it speeds up the game, but the game is, of course, balanced to be played with this boost turn on pretty much permanently. And here again, it supports Battle Pass, meaning that if you buy Battle Pass, you have this on forever. Or let's say during the time of the Battle Pass. The other important note, as you see here, is that this has changed, and those of you that played Adventure Communist during its initial launch, or let's say after the big rework, this was one of the separate tabs on the main menu, and now it's just this kind of a small button here. So you can see how the significance of Battle Pass has pretty much pushed in even into the ad-heavy games. One note about Battle Pass. If you're thinking that Battle Pass is the way to go to increase your monetization, or let's say your revenue directly, don't. Because Battle Passes usually trade your economy depth for increased conversion and retention. Keep in mind that, let's maybe look at it. Keep in mind that Battle Passes really discount your content to the point that of course, you get a really, like, let's say, higher purchase, because it doesn't really go into like $4.99 or $2.99. It's usually somewhere around those $10. But this is not the main monetization driver. So if you're thinking, I have an ad game and I want to do and go into IAPs now, let's do Battle Pass, and think that Battle Pass will be the main driver of monetization, it won't. It will definitely increase the conversion on IAPs, but it will also heavily discount your economy and your content. So be careful with that, because this can sometimes backfire. So your game needs to be able to sustain the whole thing throughout its economy. Otherwise, I wouldn't recommend implementing this. Another dynamic placement that I really like is in the Burrito Bison game from Congregate. Oh, let's maybe talk a little bit about Corlu, because this one's a really experimental one. So you're a wrestler bison being kidnapped by a bunch of gummy bears into their magical land of Gummy Land, and you just fling yourself and try to fly as far as possible. And the game was originally done through the Congregate browser platform, and you could pretty much finish it in like few hours session. And Congregate really nicely adapted it into mobile game with free-to-play monetization. So yeah, definitely recommend checking that one out. The placement I want to talk about is their chess system, or they have it like called loot piñatas. And you encounter them as some kind of flying obstacle or flying power-up during gameplay. Again, it has random rewards. It's seen only during core gameplay. It definitely has economy impact, because again, you're giving away resources. It really well thematically fits, but it adds an element of challenge, because the user need to voluntarily catch the piñata, and it's kind of hard. So you really need to make sure that you're keeping attention, looking at the screen, and keeping the piñatas, which on the other hand adds that another element of satisfaction for the user, that he was the one that even got this as a reward, not as something that was jammed into him. So what happens is, at the end of the run, where our hero pretty much falls down to the ground, there's the usual pop-up where the game says if you want to open the piñata or you don't want to open it. If you open it, of course, you play the ad, you get the rewards. If you don't, it closes and you lost it. This is a great example of using really well-suited core gameplay compatible ad placement, where the user will even feel that he was the one that he went over that ad placement, and he even gave it as a reward. So again, even though this is not like that big of a game as considered like downloads and revenue, it's really nice placement as some kind of a paradigm, like how you can really easily incorporate it into your core gameplay if it can keep up with it. Yeah, let's maybe go into one use case from our game, which is event, the bounty hunt event we run here, which I think could be a good example. And this is not really talked about, but yeah, maybe this will help out. So we have this bounty hunt event, which is pretty much an event that we run in our game that runs for 2 weeks. And here, users pretty much complete contracts from the Bounty Hunt Guild with their units. They usually means that they need to kill some specific combination of units or perform some actions and complete the contracts that you are given by the game. The contracts then add up as their currency from the Bounty Hunters Guild, and the users travel through 4 towns. Pretty much it's spread out for 2 weeks. Contract change in each town, and there's like reward for each contract and reward for each town. Pretty simple. The thing that we have here, that contract spawns every 8 hours, and if you've done all your contracts, you can skip the timers. This is again no economy impact, because what we're giving, we already budgeted the overall resources we'll be giving to the event. So even if you speed up the contracts, you don't really gain anything economic. You just pretty much manage your session, and as you go, the session pretty much can be, depending on your playtime, longer or shorter. But if you don't want to skip, you just wait and the contract spawns automatically. This is seen only during the core gameplay, so and during the event, which goes away, of course. So we're not really cluttering the UI with any other ad placement. And just an example here, if we would go here, if we click it, you see the usual skip button. And if you also don't want to do a contract, you can also re-roll it. So we have the second ad placement there that you can still do. This, of course, kicks into gems. So we don't really do that in a way that you can do it infinitely, but it's, again, moderated by daily caps. And at some point, the contracts are skipped for gems, so usually users stop there. Again, this is pretty much balanced throughout the whole 2 weeks. So even by skipping the contracts or re-rolling them, we're giving no economic value. We're just giving the users the choice of convenience, which is, I think, pretty handy. Here's a chart of how this actually works, considering the impressions. So during the time that this event is running, we see a consistent 20% increase from the base of daily impressions. So which is, I think, pretty great, even though, as I said, there's no economic impact on the economy. It's just speeding up the event. As you see here on the charts, that some players are already finishing up the event sooner, which means they don't do anything else in the event because they're pretty much finished. So to go over summary.
Jakub, mind if I interview before we move on with summary? So those were really insightful points, and your the Battle Legion game is one of the best thought games when it comes to rewarded ad design. So I just wanted to ask, for different ad placements, in terms of rewarded ad placements, do you consider it's beneficial to create, like, let's say, different ad units and monitor their performance accordingly, or it's something not beneficial? So could you please spend your thoughts on that? So for different placements, does that make sense to create different ad units to monitor their performances?
Yeah. Definitely, it's good to monitor. The thing is that, let's say the placements that I showed you here, the hunt event placements, it took us like 4 to 5 events to actually sort it out and properly balance it. Because first we thought like, it will be maybe too much ads. Let's first give the gems, then the ads, then the timers got switched out. You definitely want to fine tune it in a way to find the best like impressions and pretty much LTV. That's what you want to end up with. Good thing is also to A/B test different placements on different groups of players. What I would really not consider is do something that is not really accessible to the other part of the community, because mid-core games usually have communities, they talk to each other, and you don't want to get into that situation. So one of the best thing, and this is like pretty much one part of it, is that test the ad placements through an event or like some kind of a temporary feature. You do the feature, you try your setup, it didn't work out, the metrics were horrible, so you rotate it out of the game and you again put it back, because it's an event, players are okay with it, they know it's content for temporary use, that it will may or may not return, and you again are able to modify the metrics. So as I said, even here it took us again 3 or 4 runs after we were sufficient, or let's say satisfied with the overall results, and also there was a big input for our player community. So if you're running a game that's having a strong community, that's also great, because people will be asking for ad placements. I know it sounds crazy, but they will. And they like the role placement is pretty much the product of that. So before, when we were doing this, the contracts were pretty much stable and you were not able to skip those. But again, people didn't really want to do some of those, or they were finding it difficult and challenging. Of course, we listen to the community, so we give them another ad placement, which was the re-rolling of the contracts. And Indian players were much more happier overall. Like the Discord sentiment was great. So yeah, definitely fine tune and iterate. And I wouldn't really go into like placing ad placement directly into the game, meaning like the core gameplay, more like iterate on the ad stuff, or let's say temporal stuff, because then you can always, nobody does this on the first try perfect. So I think that's completely understandable.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for the answer.
Sure, no worries. I guess let's wrap this up with a little summary. So what this means, what I would like to tell you is pretty much have a healthy static placement to provide the baseline. Because static placements, again, needs to be part of the UI. You don't really want to have much of those because you don't want to clutter the UIs, but it's really good to have one. really try to focus it down, try to optimize it, try to be one of the bread bringers. I mean, something in vicinity of 60 or 70% of overall impressions. That should be your static placement. Then try to be creative and use the dynamic placements. Use the context value, try to put it into core loop where it is really, really valuable for the user, and don't just throw away your economy away, meaning that just as people give currencies such as soft currency, hard currency, try to think outside of the box and try to put it somewhere where it's immediately value for the user, but it doesn't eat out into your economy. And of course, try to fit it into core gameplay. Usually it never works in a way that you just take one placement from one game, put it into your game, and why it's not working? Because it was modeled for different core gameplay. So try to think behind the ideas and setups of these ad placements and try to copy those, not the direct specific placement. And yeah, make sure your mediation is set up efficiently, because this whole internal part, you can try as much as you can pretty much have the best ad design on the market. If your mediation is not set up correctly and you're selling your ads under the value and you have bad eCPMs, this won't work. So just like simple reminder, and then of course everybody is pretty much happy. Yeah, again, thanks so much for time, and thanks Marius for having me. Looking forward to your questions.
Thank you very much for sharing this very insightful session. And let's start this Q&A part. Maybe actually I will start with a little bit follow up of your session, Jakub. Maybe did you do any test or an analysis of this rewarded on retention? I mean, of course, it's a very broad topic, but did you see any patterns? In general, we know that rewarded improve retention, but did you see anything deeper in that specific area?
What I would say is pretty much it's really important to keep your ads that you are getting clean, kind of in a way, because what Chris was pretty much saying before, that the ad quality kind of kicks in and people will churn if your ads are pretty much not up to the standard. In mid-core and casual games, this pretty much doubles by that, because you need to keep your player base happy in a way that you don't really want to give them something that's kind of scammy or crashing down or increasing some kind of problems there. So that would be the biggest impact on retention, I guess. Keep your ad inventory that you're getting into your game clean. And then don't really fall into the fallacy that payers don't like ads, because this doesn't really work out. Payers like ads, and as you've seen there's even the integration with the battle pass, we again increases your conversion. So I would say try to think of those as some kind of a, let's say, healthy source of differentiation of your revenue, especially when we're talking about mid-core. Hitting the mark of 70% IPs and 30% ads should be completely doable, I think, for every mid-core game. Some games just don't do it because of the branding. So let's say you don't see ads in Supercell games, but that's, I guess, most of a question of a branding. But let's say you see it in games from King, and then there's on these ludicrous DAU numbers, it's pretty big amount of revenue. So again, depends on your brand, depends on your game, but I would say for mid-core and casual game, hitting the 70-30% mark should be completely doable.
Thank you very much. Eren, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the presentation. It was also very insightful to me as well. So I was just wondering for the CTR part of things. So as we see from the data, so I'm just trying to now compound the both presentation and come up with one single question. And yeah, it's to open question to all. So after IDFA's depreciation, we are able to see that the CTRs maybe non-intuitively dropped due to non-personalized ads. So I'm just talking about Google Ad Network data. But what we see when the ads are not personalized, we are seeing lesser and lesser CTRs. So do you think that's something that has to be taken into consideration when trying to get the opt-in rates or in your overall ad placement design? I know it's a kind of an open question, but feel free to jump in if you have any insights.
I think it might be unique to Google Ads because with HTML5 ads, you can pretty much control the click-through rate because you can control when you want to send the user to the store. And as you saw, with our data overall, we work with 30 different ad networks, and on average, we're seeing CTR increase a little bit. My theory behind this is that because of the decrease in personalization, advertisers will just send you to the store as fast as possible and try to let the store sell you on the game. And so my thought was, okay, maybe CTRs will increase. To answer your question, as it comes to CTR, I'm mostly concerned about churn. And so we're measuring CTR. We're looking at the advertiser. We're looking at the ad creative, and we're seeing, okay, was there some kind of mistake here? Does it look intentional? And is that causing churn? The other interesting thing that you can do with this data is you can back out of an IPM. So you can look at all the ad creative in your portfolio, and if you're measuring churn, you're measuring the potential install, and you can back out of the IPM of other advertisers in your game. So not only do you have kind of like an ad quality benchmark, but you also have some kind of ad intelligence. So that's one of the things I really like about measuring churn on these types of ads. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. That's something again very insightful and interesting to me, because you have your own ad quality setup, monitoring setup, right? So it's not all ad networks are able to provide, and it's something very interesting. So maybe it's possibly in the near future we are coming to see more and more of that kind of ad, let's say, quality tools. I know like lots of ad mediation platforms such as AdMob has that functionality, but yours seems to be a little bit more sophisticated than market average. So yeah, it's very interesting.
Thank you so much. We were originally using a service called Sumla by IronSource, but then after they got acquired, we decided to build our own tool, and it's been great. We really enjoy using it.
Brilliant. So Mariusz, would you like me to go through the questions, or would you like to jump on?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So okay. So for the first question, actually, we covered little bit, but maybe if you have still anything to add, I'm just gonna ask it once again. So what is the like gist of improving the ATT opt-in in games? So do you think some games will have different contents, maybe some categories even breakdown for ATT opt-in? What do you think? I guess this question, anyone?
Maybe a little bit on my side. Let's say I think there will be probably some kind of difference between the hyper casual and the rest of the industry, what I think. But yeah, as I'm mostly like, I did some hyper casual stuff back then, but not currently. But what we're seeing is pretty much mid-core games are having really high opt-in rates, so definitely something even higher, maybe what Chris was showing on the benchmarks, even in our game. So I guess the users there, they are kind of more well versed in what they're getting into, and they know that yeah, it's not really about data privacy compared to, let's say, the usual app that's a non-gaming app or something like that, and they're trying to maximize the value through their, like, they will collect their rewards, they will collect their quests, they will collect their free stuff, they will collect their ads, and if they see, or let's say if the developer even mentions in it that we'll give you the right ads and like help us optimize something, they usually trust the developer. So I would say in mid-core, or let's say more community-driven games, this would be definitely higher.
Which means that in this case, you think that will be like more and more kind of opportunity to even kind of grow the brand of specific game and then use it for the growth in this case?
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, brand
you know,
like trust. Yeah.
Yeah, so if we, let's say, omit the part that the user got into the game through a real ad, not a fake ad, and you're building your brand, which is kind of problematic in the current market conditions, you can definitely leverage this. And I think, and I see it myself pretty much on our Discord community, that people are talking a lot about the game. People are making guides, and pretty much they are making the ads for your game, being the promotional stuff on YouTube and the influencer marketing. So yeah, something that's there that definitely will help this kind of genre. If we're talking about hyper casual, or if we're talking about, let's say, stuff that's been done on the fake marketing side, I think it will be a little more clunky or bumpy there. But yeah, don't know what will happen here. But I still think like the investment into your community should pay off more in these times.
All right, thanks for the answer. And on top of the question, maybe I can add to divert this question to Chris. So as a rule of thumb, like the main takeaway was maybe invest in your brand and like approach to your community in a more let's say friendly way. So build your community, that would increase in turn the ATT opt-in, let's say. But I'm wondering for hyper casuals, Chris, you have some IP let's say like you're in some of your games you are also partnering with some IP business. So do you think that maybe you can prove that with the data, does the games that has IP collaboration has a greater ATT opt-in, or is it not the case?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So at Gamejam, we have about 20 different licenses now. And the games with licenses, they have strong opt-in. I don't know off the top of my head if they're the ones in the 80s or what, but they have really strong opt-in. But then the other thing that's interesting about that is they have typically lower CPIs. They have an audience already there, right? You're not trying to find the audience; it's already there. And then also the audience is also very engaged, and so they have higher IP conversion, typically stronger IPMs. It's kind of like a buff all around for a lot of KPIs. So I think working with an established brand. Maybe easier for hyper casual than building a brand to work with an established brand already. And I think it's definitely a good path.
Perfect, makes sense. So maybe I can take the second question here to be conscious of time. So what benchmarks for ads per daily active users and ads engagement do you usually target? Anyone would like to jump in?
Maybe I guess I can go from mid-core side and then Chris can compare to the hyper casual side. So I would say ad engagement for mid-core casual will be somewhere around 60-70%. I think you're pretty good there. And ads per DAU ratio, that would be something in the vicinity of 4 to 5 ads per user. And if we're talking about engaged users only, we're cutting the denominator, I would say 8 to 9. So something in that vicinity.
Yes, those are good numbers. Those are like almost similar to our numbers for interstitial ads. So like we have an adoption rate. We try to get an adoption rate of 70 to at least 80% on interstitial ads, and then the frequency we want to show like 8 ads per imp DAO per 8 impressions per daily active users.
All right. Thanks again for the answers. So another question that we have: did you also notice higher churn rate for your game with higher CTR rate? And that ties us back to the topic that we discussed earlier. So anyone would like to jump in?
Yes, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, I think probably, yeah. Also, if we get something that's not really fitting the funnel that we usually use for the ad inventory that we sell.
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we'll see a drop in retention, and then we're going through all of our checks and stuff and looking at, oh, it came from this ad network, and we look at the ad source, and then we go to the ad source and we're like, what's going on here? And then we find in our ad quality dashboard, we're getting these 100% CTR ads, and it's just like, oh my god. And so it's like, this is why retention's dropping. And so definitely, you remove those and then retention goes back up. So yes, absolutely, it could contribute to higher churn.
And in this case, like, building on that, Chris, like, did you notice much higher churn rates for interstitials versus other types of ads, or like it's rather myth?
It's mostly on the ad quality, to be honest, from what I've seen. Like, and it, if you have really clean ads, it's surprising how many impressions you can get.
Mm-hmm.
So I really believe that the ad quality is probably the most important
Mm-hmm.
thing, more so than the frequency at which you show ads.
All right. And also maybe it's sorry, Jakub, you would like to say something?
No. Just definitely agree that ad quality goes really hand in hand in the mid-core genre. Like, as I said, like, you have long playing users that want to stick forever, pretty much. So you want to keep them handy.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe some insights from our end as well. So we are also able to see there are some different ranges of CTRs between different ad networks that you can also verify. I guess it's a good approach to evaluate the networks in their specifics. So some networks are showing you different templates. As Chris mentioned, they are making you jump into store without clicking anything. So it's built in the template. So it's better to evaluate the CTR downward or upward trend specific to ad network rather than having an average between all of the ad networks. Right. I can see the questions are taken out, but I still have the access. Yeah, perfect. Great. Where were we?
Do you have like this, probably more like the Chris? Do you have like special design waterfall for iOS 14 users, or it's too early, or like you don't think it makes actually it is worth of the hassle actually?
We didn't actually, but after I gave this presentation, we're going to tomorrow. So like, I mean, the data is brand new, right? So like, but definitely it looks like because of the reduce in latency that we're seeing, we could stack the waterfall a little bit deeper and maybe offset the loss in CPM. But that's my go-to strategy after giving this talk.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The other question, you may not have the answer to this, but let me ask it. Isn't the ATT tutorial, the warm-up screen, very high risk as it can be considered as incentivization by Apple and outright be rejected? Does that happen to you?
I mean, you're just at risk of being rejected. You're not going to lose your Apple account, for having the the wrong ATT prompt. But yeah, I mean, this also can be a little frustrating because literally, like, we are, going through the guidelines and copying what Apple says, and the next week Apple decides to change something, and our ATT prompt is in violation. And so this literally happened with some language that we copied from an example from their website, and then they cited it as a violation. So you just have to fix it and update it. You're only at risk of getting a build rejected from production, and then it's a quick fix. You update it, and then you're good.
Yeah, I think one thing to note here is that the wording there in the guidelines is kind of vague at some point, that I think Apple is kind of keeping the buffer there and maybe expecting some kind of a tricks that will pretty much end up in the industry where people will try to incentivize this, and it can give Apple the leeway there to outright say, like, this is not something we want to see. But they cannot say it now because nobody knows what will be it.
Yeah, agreed. And then we can recommend developers to stick to what is externally available from Apple's guidelines, and apart from that, it's up to experimentation. And there are lots of cases that I also seen very similar dialogue screens were treated otherwise. But yeah, keep experimenting, and maybe on top of everything, we can also add localizing the ATT prompt or the warm-up, the pre-ATT prompt screen to the towards different countries that you are getting your users most. It can affect the ATT opt-in rates as well, as per my as per what I've seen with some of the partners that we are working with. All right. So the other question. There's a question who is asking your mediation provider for your games. So would you like to expose, or I'm not sure if it's secret?
We have our own mediation management system, and then on top of that, we use MoPub, and we also use Max by AppLovin.
Currently we're using Iron Source, just a standard thing, I guess.
All right. Thank you very much. So the other question. So what is reasonable CTR nowadays? Like it depends from ad network to ad network, but any number on top of your head?
I mean, I just think the CTRs today are insane, crazy, insane. Like, when I first started advertising, in mobile, we're looking at, a CTR of 1-2% on Facebook is really good, and with these interstitial ads, maybe 6 to 12%. And now they're like 50, 60, 70, 80, 90%. It's crazy. It's just insane. I have no idea what is reasonable nowadays. 100%. It's like, come on,
That's insane. Definitely insane. So why do you have the like go to store button then? So why do you have that button then?
Right.
But actually, like, once we are talking about those ads, like, do you see because, like, in most of the games, like, still majority of ads I see are rather like the ads from other games, yeah. And do you think it's like, it will be still the case, or like do you see that actually more and more like there is really opportunity even for the other developers actually to push more like non-gaming ads in their games, because on one side it should have better outcome for attention, because you are not moving and sending user to other game, and then on the other hand it can be even higher eCPM ads. How do you see it, like, coming in the next months and years?
I mean, we've always tried to get more brand content in our games, but now with these high CTR ads, man, I'm knocking on everyone's door trying to integrate trying to get more brand content now more than ever before. And not so much because of the competitors, it's because of the competitors plus these like 100% CTR ads. It's just because it actually works, like if you're advertising and you're sending people to the store, on the user acquisition side, you'll see stronger IPMs and lower CPIs because of this. Now the ad quality may be different, right? Jakub had mentioned, might also be bad for your brand, and maybe the LTV of the user isn't that high, even though you got them in more cheaply. But they convert and they work. So everyone, especially in hyper casual, is doing this. And yeah, so I welcome any brand ads into our games. Like, if you're an ad network watching, please hit me up. You contact me on LinkedIn. We'll put your SDK in.
It's a public announcement.
Yeah, maybe one thing from the midcore standpoint, that what happens is usually that the best inventory that you can sell is to your direct competitors. which is like you need to also weigh in that pretty much you're an RPG. Do you want the other 3 best RPGs in the market be directly advertising in your game if you're talking about those $10 $10 CPI users that you have in your game? So there's also another question that I would pose here, like if it really pays off and if your LTV can keep up with it, or if you are not just funneling your users through your UA to another game. So also maybe consider that on the mid-core side, because I think like it's 60% based on like how hyper casual inventory is sold between each other. But with RPGs or let's say mid-core games, you don't really have the luxury of players playing like 20 of them at once. They're pretty much invested in one game and one only, and they don't have pretty much the budget to invest into other games. So you want to keep them as tight as possible.
Really good point, yeah. And actually, like building on that, how do you think, like, what like, what kind of techniques are like, the different companies are using to really approach that kind of challenge? Because still, I don't think like, the regular blacklisting is not often met. I think. I believe like, the developers are trying, to approach it in different ways. Maybe if you could like elaborate a little bit about that.
Yeah. If you blacklist, you're pretty much cutting out your best inventory because those people are bidding the most. So that's again the offset that we're talking about. The other thing is that you also need to consider where to put the ads. I mean, like where in the actual session, and if the user feels that he can finish something in the game, or like his session ended, or like if he jumps directly into another game, because let's say that ad from Archero that you've seen there, that the master will give you more health into your current run. Do you think I will go and install the competitive RPG when I'm on this really good run? So that's again the question that you want to go through, but also you want to have that install rate and click-through rate on the ad. So just, I guess, a matter of like pretty much testing out and finding out and what's happening currently on the market. Some games do like waves of really heavy advertising, which you can possibly blacklist some of those. If let's say, I know there's like really big promotions currently happening in top market RPGs with cross IP stuff, like stuff from AAA gaming is pretty much the IPs are getting into those, and they're just doing like really big campaigns. You can pretty much survive that on, let's say, less of an LTV if you want to blacklist that, and then again enable it later down the line. But again, depends heavily on your LTV and how far the users get into your game and how much of an LTV they give you.
Okay, thank you guys. Someone is asking if you have like an open position in Traplight, so I think it's better to reach out to Jakub and ask about that.
Sure. Feel free to reach out on LinkedIn.
And then someone is asking about CPI. Of course, it's a very broad question. I can just say that and right now there are actually a lot of variables that they take it under consideration, like country, genre, and even type of the campaign. So maybe starting from just a few cents for users in US versus let's see, RPG in US can cost like in CPA campaigns like $10-20 per install. Okay, thank you guys really for the time spent on that. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, and thank you really for that. And of course, for everyone looking at that session, if you would like to just go to our website and see another sessions coming in the next weeks. And one again, thanks to the guys for the time spent. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Jakub. Thank you, Aaron, for the time.
Thank you, Mariusz. Thank you, Aaron, for having me.
Thank you, Mariusz. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you guys.
See you.
Cheers.